Hi, this is Payman Javadi with Topics with Mr. Javadi, and we are just honored, very much honored, to be at Mr. Ramirez's house. This is Jesse Ramirez, and he is a very talented person. Hi, Jesse. Thank you for having us over. So, lots of talent. Lots of talent. We're going to get into it in a little bit. And so, let me just start by saying that this is a local musician, essentially. He has been singing and doing music for as long as I think I know, really. But we're going to get to the details, find out how it all happened in just a short bit. So, without further ado, let's go to Jesse. Jesse, hello. Thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome, no problem.
And accepting this invitation, all of that. And so, you began in grade school, am I correct, with music?
Yeah, I sang in choirs when I was in school. And,
yeah. And so, did you form a band or?
I had a band when I got into high school. We had a rock and roll band. When I came here to Greeley in '65, I met some other guys, and we started a rock and roll band. We called ourselves the Bonnevilles, and then we joined up with another group, another couple guys, and then we changed the name to the Wailers.
Now, especially for an Iranian guy like myself, I still, I know when you say rock and roll, it's got different connotations. You're not talking about Led Zeppelin type rock and roll. You're talking about like 50s.
Yes, 50s and 60s.
60s type rock and roll.
At that time, yes.
Yeah, okay. Very, very influential music, because a lot of those artists, like the one I just mentioned, always mention those types of bands who influenced them. And so, why don't you comment on that a little bit, the roots of that music and why it's so powerful?
Well, the roots for us was not so much what you're talking, Led Zeppelin or anything like it. It was more, like you said, 50s and 60s music, which was what we would call now oldies, as opposed to the heavy metal rock and roll. And we did a lot of the 50s songs and 60s songs. And at that time, popular groups when we were in high school were groups like the Beatles, the Monkees, the Beach Boys,
right?
Young Rascals, groups like that were very popular when we were in high school.
Well, what I'm basically saying is groups like Led Zeppelin and The Who and groups like that, they always mention the influence they had from the groups like the ones you're mentioning. And so they always talk about the roots that they had with Little Richard and people like that. So I guess the question I would have is, why do you think that music, because almost across the board, all of them just about give credit to those musicians. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's such a powerful influence?
I think because it was the beginning of rock and roll. It was the beginning of it, in the 50s and the 60s, and that's what they listened to. Not only what we would call rock and roll, but they especially the English groups, listened to a lot of black music, rhythm and blues, and they got influence from black musicians, probably more than American kids at that time.
Like Chuck Berry and people.
Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and there was lots of doo-wop groups back in the 50s, and I think that influenced many of the rock and roll musicians of later times.
How did you find the reaction of the crowds as you did this type of music?
Well, we played for dances, and we played a combination of music. Our particular group were all Hispanic kids, and we played a combination of what you would call Mexican music and rock and roll both. We mixed. So we played a lot of wedding dances, those type of things, and then we also played at a club that was in Garden City. It was called the Lido Club. It was a nightclub, and so we used to play there quite a bit. But we had a good following, the young people.
That's great. That's wonderful. Now, I think there's a misconception out there sometimes, maybe not all the time, but sometimes, that this is not as much of a hard work, and that's just not true, is it? Because you guys have to do so much work, especially every week you had a gig or two that you had to go to, or maybe more.
Right.
And that was just a lot of hours, a lot of dedication.
Yeah, we practiced quite a bit, and then and we would play sometimes 2 nights on a weekend. It wasn't like it was a professional gig because we were still in high school, but we would play at least once a weekend.
Yeah, so that's quite a bit of hours
of
playing music. So.
Yeah.
So from there, what happened after that? What did you do after that, music-wise?
Music-wise, once I got married, I kind of stopped for a while. Didn't do music for a while. And then I got into a couple bands where I would fill in. There was the guy that was in our rock and roll band as a drummer. I was a drummer also, but he was better than I, so he became the drummer. I became the vocalist. He played with some older people, and they played dances like I would call it songs like Ball and the Jack and In the Mood, those kind of songs like that. And it was for the older crowd. They had an accordion, a piano, a clarinet, and a bass, and it was a man by the name of Jerry J. Ramirez who had the band. And so I would fill in once in a while when David, the other guy, couldn't fill in. I would did that, and then there was another couple of bands that I would play with a few times during that period. And then mostly I didn't do a whole lot of music until later on, and I started singing with a choir in church. And then I got some opportunities to form another band. It was actually a duet with a friend of mine. His name was Steve Wilson, and he played keyboard, and I sang, and we called ourselves Double Shot.
Wow.
And that was probably in the early 2000s when I started doing that again. So it was a pretty long break,
But sounds like you had a very good mix of variety and, of different types of music that you learned. And you had quite a range. Steve and I, with Double Shot, we started off doing what was really popular at that time was country music. So we were playing strictly country music. Then we evolved slowly back into some of the older rock and roll that we used to do. So we did a combination of the rock and roll and the country music. And then after that, Steve, I kind of left Steve, and about a year later, I formed another band with a friend of mine by the name of Pete McDonald, and it was called Shebang. And it was Pete was the drummer, and we had 2 guitars, and we had a female vocalist, and that was a really good group. We played a lot with that group, like at Rafferty's and different bars around town. Mostly what we did was play bars. And those are places that, like Rafferty's, that really did do a lot of live music.
Yeah, there's hardly any live music anymore like there was then, but there was places like Rafferty's, the Plantation, the Green Mill, the White Horse, that all had live music at that time.
And really, at one point, this area with Greeley and Evans and Garden City, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like there was a lot of live band activity, like Alpha Centauri and groups like that.
Exactly right.
Am I right on that?
Yeah. I mean, there was, when we were teenagers, and all through that time, there was a lot of live bands, a lot of rock and roll bands in the area, and there was, they had battle of the bands type things, and just about every kid when I was in high school, was in a band. They had bands. It was popular to be in a band.
So what? I guess one of the questions I have for you is, what drew you to music? What was it that motivated you, I guess?
I don't know. When I was a little kid, I had an aunt who used to sing to us all the time, and I think she got me into to where I really liked singing. And then when I was young, those uncles and aunts that I had, they were all teenagers when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and they were all listening to 50s music, and that was a big influence on my life. Just hearing all that music. I heard a lot of rock and roll music when I was a kid.
Yeah. Coming from that, there's some more here. Coming from that, you find yourself, if I'm not mistaken, I suppose next with Elvis Impersonation Band. And what was that all about, and how did that come about?
Yeah, well, when I had my band Shebang, there was a friend of mine that he played a trumpet in church with us, and he played with the Elvis band. And they were looking for backup singers for the Elvis group, and he asked me if I wanted to do that, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll try it. So I ended up doing that for probably 14 or 15 years, doing the backup with the Elvis group.
What was, I've always wondered about that, because, you see about this, you read about it, or you see it on YouTube nowadays anymore, with these Elvis impersonation bands. Of course, he was a very influential musician, Elvis was. A lot of love for that man. Very talented person. But what do you think? I mean, it's like such a giant movement of so many people that love him and impersonate him and so on. What do you attribute that to?
Just he was very charismatic. He was handsome, and then he had all those moves that at that time were considered pretty risque, you would say, I guess. And he just influenced so many people, and besides that, he was a very, very good singer. Really outstanding singer.
He sang gospel. He sang
gospel and rock and roll.
Country.
His gospel music actually won more awards than his rock and roll music.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so he was just an icon, I would call him now, because everybody knows who Elvis is, and even young kids today, they know who Elvis is, and his image and his life, it hasn't died in people today.
Did you ever go to Graceland or anything like that?
No, I never went to Graceland.
No. Something that I wouldn't mind doing.
No, I wouldn't mind doing myself.
Yeah,
I would like to go.
Sounds like a fascinating place. So that is still going on. Are you still doing that?
No, I stopped doing that about a year ago.
And now your latest involvement has been with this Persian music ensemble.
Right.
Now,
yes.
when I talked about range, like 15 minutes ago, boy, I wasn't kidding. I mean, to go from all that to Persian music, how do you find that? How's it working out for you?
It was just one of those things where Farzin and I have been friends since probably the early 70s when he first came here. We met through volleyball, and we became friends. And then we had a long period of time where we didn't see each other or anything, and he ran into him downtown one day, and he invited me. He said, I'm going to mention that I could play the drums, and then he invited me over, and I came one night, and this was before Pejman was going, and I came one night and played with him for a little bit, and then I didn't go anymore for a while. They asked me to go back, but I just didn't have the time. And then maybe a couple of years later, I ran into Farzin again, and then he invited me again, and then that's when I kind of really started going steady and enjoying, the company. Of course, Farzin, with his wonderful meals that he feeds us.
Yeah, the hospitality.
Yeah. And then just do something different. And I mentioned before to you when I saw you that my drumming is not Persian drumming by any means. It's more a Latin style drumming, because that's what I know.
But you just make it fit.
It fits,
work.
and I mean, beats are beats, and they all kind of are similar in every music, and so that's what I do, and Farzin seems to enjoy it, so I keep going, and I just enjoy the like you say, I enjoy the camaraderie, and it's fun. It's fun. I enjoy it.
Well, my brother Pejman, who plays the piano, is doing the camera recording. That's why we made a reference to him a little bit ago. But he has seen Jesse play the drums. I've seen Jesse play the drums. Pejman, what do you think about the drumming that Jesse does?
Absolutely incredible. I mean, I enjoy it so much.
Yeah. And so. I think so too, because, I mean, I'm not the most highest expert in Persian music. But I do know, what I'm listening to because I grew up with it. And when I'm 64 years old, and so I grew up with it. And when I listened to Jesse play the drums in that Farsi music or rhythm section, it's absolutely incredible. And it just really fascinates me that people like him and Claire, they come from a Western tradition and are able to make that transition to the Iranian music. There's a message in that, I think, for us someplace. But that's just wonderful. It's their willingness, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's your willingness.
Yes. And the music is, there are certain tunes that I'm very familiar with from going so often, and I'm comfortable with. And then Farzin's always breaking out something new, every week too.
Yeah. Is it more improvisational when you play, or do you think it's more arranged?
No, it's improvisational.
It's improvisational.
Yes. Yeah.
And so Claire was kind of talking about that she's really kind of learned how to improvise better. And would that be your experience as well? Or
I think for Claire, Claire is a fantastic musician.
Yeah, she really is.
And I think Claire, a lot of the music she has picked up, and she knows it inside and out. And then when Farzin decides to do something new, that's when she really improvises.
Yeah.
Now Claire, about 2 years ago, they decided that they wanted a violin for the Elvis band.
Yeah.
So they were scouting around, and a couple ladies said that we have somebody in mind, and I said, well, I have somebody in mind too, and I think she'd be really good. And what happened was the other people didn't pan out, and I said, well, let me bring this lady in, and she was fantastic. Wow. She played almost all the songs with us, and at first they were particularly wanting one song that they wanted her in, and then pretty soon they realized she could pretty much do anything. So,
wow, that I didn't know.
It was amazing.
That's awesome.
She's a great musician.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we're so blessed to have you in the community. We're so blessed to have your contribution to the Persian Music Ensemble. I know it fills an absolutely wonderful need. And as I said, I listened the other night, and I just thought it was fantastic. So I really enjoyed your playing.
Well, thank you.
And I guess I would just finish up by asking you, to the young people, what would you say if they want to get into the music business in some way? What would you say to them?
I would just say, if you have that much interest in it, just keep trying. Find people that have the same interests as you do, and then try. If you want to form a band, find the people that want to do the same thing, and just keep trying. Yeah.
Would you say that perseverance is
the
main key here?
And then really practicing. Yeah. Being a practiced musician, I'm a musician by ear, and I would encourage young people to study music in school and to pick up an instrument. I think that's really important.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Jesse Ramirez, thank you so much for this time.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And this is Payman Javadi again with Topics with Mr. Javadi. Hit subscribe, hit like. I think you'll enjoy what we are trying to do. We'll bring more your way. Thanks for watching.